Thank you, everyone, for being here today. We are so excited to have a conversation today about high-performing teams. So, as you saw in the invite, we're going to talk today about strategies of high-performing teams, and this is all sort of wrapped around a recent report that Acorn put out all about high-performing teams. We did a study and got responses from 5,431. That's a real number.
Mhm.
Folks from around the world, North America, UK, also Europe and Asia Pacific. We have lots of respondents from there. 50% of them are leaders, 50% of them are individual contributors. So a broad range of our audience giving feedback on what makes a high performing team. In our report, we published 8 behaviors of high performing teams from our research and also 6 actions that leaders can take to improve the performance of their team. Now, you're here not to talk specifically about the report, and we also we have a lot of we don't have a lot of time. We couldn't even do that if we wanted to. But what we are excited to share today is we have an expert. To laughter. That's You said you're going to laugh when I said that. There it is, right
I,
there.
I,
So
I
thank
humbly take
you.
that title. Thank you kindly.
I love it. So we have Andrew LaMonica here today joining us, and we're going to have a conversation about high performing teams. If you wouldn't mind, I would love for you to introduce yourself, and we're
Sure.
ready.
Well, thank you so much, Susie. I appreciate the warm introduction and the opportunity to chat with everybody. So I'm a global product and design executive. I've been really fortunate in my career to work with some great places like Google, GE, the Olympics, Bloomberg, Adobe, and do work I'm super proud of. But like you could go to my LinkedIn profile to check out my pedigree. But one of the things that Susie and I were talking about too is like a lot of the challenges that executives and individuals face in creative industries. They're not like product problems or design problems or strategy problems. A lot of it is people problems. And I got smart a couple of years ago. I got licensed in executive coaching, so I have like letters after my name and stuff. But that makes the people part of my job just so much easier. And high performing teams is something pretty critical. So we're gonna be talking about like the people component um, of making work really fluid and high functioning groups of individuals. So thanks for having me.
I love it. Thank you for being here. And I love your broad range of experience, and I'm really excited to dig in. So, for those who don't know, I'm Susie Hall. I am president of community and customer engagement at Acorn. I've been here 24 years. I can't even believe it. My current job is to lead a community for senior design leaders called Inside Out. And so I also get a chance to talk to lots of amazing senior leaders, just like Andy, about how to make a high performing team. So we got lots of data points we're gonna talk through here today. But we're going to start with asking you a question, because today we want to not just have a here's some information kind of
Yes.
LinkedIn live. We want your feedback too. So if we can queue up the question, we would love to know from you. Think about the best team that you have ever been on, and what were some of the behaviors of that team. So if you could put your answer in the chat, we would love to hear from you. Best team you've ever been on, what were some of the behaviors of the team?
And it could be
Apparently.
like a
Oh,
work
go ahead,
team.
Andy.
It could be like a team at school or university, sports, whatever it is. Just think about it real quick. We'll give you like maybe 10 seconds to just throw some stuff in the chat. Okay. And Susie, I'll let you continue and vamp.
Yeah. Oh, well, apparently, I was going to say, apparently Peter's best team had no project managers. Peter, I'm just going to bring that up because I'm acknowledging your comment there. And everybody has a different experience with high performing teams. So, all right. Who can give us one? There we go. Oh, laughed a lot. There you go. Humor. I love it. I would like to be on that team, Brad, and hi.
Now, it's super common when we do talks like this that sometimes people are just kind of riding the LinkedIn Live, just kind of listening, and that's cool too. We I've done this bunch. And Susie has done this a myriad of times too, but it's always nice to get some initial feedback to see where the audience is. Now, Susie, you and I know this; the audience doesn't. So when we started talking about this lecture of high performing teams, there's so many facets of it. So there's like 14 versions of this talk, and we get to go wherever the audience wants to go. So it's pretty cool.
I love it.
Um,
We got a
now this
lot
is
here, Andy. Now, look at that.
yeah, this is really interesting. Empathy comes up a lot. High trust. That's good too. It's really interesting. And as people are throwing stuff in the chat, I've done this exercise actually a bunch. with everything from like big tech organizations to internal teams I was working on too. And a lot of the answers are similar. No matter where you are on the earth, what teams you're working on, you'll hear things like high trust or supported, or everybody's kind of going in the same direction. We feel like there was clarity with what we're trying to do. So it's really interesting. Now, there has been tons of research on this, whether it's like leadership management or high performance of athletes. There's just tons of studies over the past few decades. And companies, like the smart ones, have actually codified what it means to be high performing, like your Apples, your Amazons, and your Googles. Um, and they talk a lot internally about what, not just like what it takes to be a high performing team, but like what it takes to be a high performing team here. So when I joined GE, they were Fortune 10, and I was on the CMO's team, and I actually had to go to their training about the 21 behaviors of how this culture works. I think Apple University in the 2000s had 32 behaviors. Amazon has their published 14. I think now it's 16. Their leadership principles. But through all the decades in research, it comes down to 7 core behaviors that are consistent, which is pretty much table stakes for any high performing team. And for those of you who are the note taking type in the audience, I'm going to do a little bit of that. We're going to throw up a slide in a little bit too that'll list these things. But the 7 capabilities are trust, respect, constructive interactions, optimism, camaraderie, communication, and diversity of thought. So when you go through all the research and when you talk about the teams, it kind of boils down to this. There's more, but these are the behaviors that come up a ton. And you could take the slide down for a second, because I'm actually going to unpack these a little bit. And Susie, if it's okay with you, I'm going to talk about these
Yeah.
a little bit. And
I love it.
if you want, do you want the audience to vote on which one that we can talk about more?
Oh,
Is
yeah.
that how you want to do
So
this?
start thinking about this. As we listen to Andy, we are going to take a vote afterwards and dig a little bit deeper into one of these 7. I just want to also acknowledge, thank you for putting all of your comments in the chat here. Lots of those mirror things that are on this top 7. No surprise there, huh, Andy? But let's dig in. Tell us.
Susie, was anything surprising about the 7 that I just listed?
Surprising. That's such a great question. I would say maybe not surprising, but one of the things we found from the report that we put out was that constructive interaction was not necessarily, it did not rate quite as high on high performing teams as we thought. It was definitely higher on a high performing team than a low performing team, but constructive interaction seems like that would be prevalent. So that surprised me
Ooh,
from the report. I love that it's on your list here, though.
awesome. Yeah. So trust came up a bunch. So I'll lead with that. So when you talk about trust, like diagnostically, that is credibility. Like, are you going to do what you say you're going to do? And consistent behavior over time. Now, there's a lot to dig into. Even if the audience wants to talk about, I'll gladly do that. But when you talk about a definition for trust in high performing teams, it's credibility and consistent behavior over time. Optimism is interesting. Optimism is the belief that the team can overcome challenging things. There's this kind of growth mindset that focuses on opportunities and solutions rather than like obstacles and setbacks. Respect is the third one. That's positive interactions and collaborations. That's valuing other people's opinions, not always agreeing. I want to be very clear about that, but it's accepting that other people's point of views may have some merit. Camaraderie. Now, camaraderie is interesting because that's the separation between a working group and a team. A working group is just a bunch of people together with their goals and objectives, but a team, you have 2 markers. One is a bond of unity, and the other is a shared purpose. So those things to consider when you start talking about camaraderie. Now, constructive interactions. That's where team members that are solution oriented towards each other, where everyone is contributing to like the overall success of whatever the team objective is or the organization. Value diversity. That's a big one. I mean, everyone on this call understands that that is important. But it's the thing I want to highlight though. It's not just embracing differences, but it's how do you leverage that diversity for innovation and problem solving. And the last one, communication. That's being open and transparent, all of the obvious things. But it's also, this is the thing that gets dropped a bit. It's when the people are committed to an effective exchange of information. Like that's when you
Hmm.
start talking about silo bustings and people who kind of keep information to themselves. So there you have all seven.
Yeah.
If you want to throw the slide up real quick, that's great. But if
Yeah.
not, no worries. So we have the seven things, and Susie, I'll leave that to you for
Let's do it. Yeah.
how you want the
So
audience to vote.
we're going to dig into one of these. So what we would love for you to do, you can pop the slide back up for that, just so that everybody has a reference point for what the seven are. Thank you, Andy, for going through those. But we would love for you to throw into the chat your vote for one you'd like to hear a little bit more about. So I already see from when we mentioned earlier, we have trust and constructive interaction. Thank you, Maggie, and LinkedIn user. That's my favorite. Hi, LinkedIn user.
Awesome.
So I know, right? So, but
We'll
we
give
would
you
love
like
to know what you think.
yeah, we'll give you like 10 seconds
10
to
seconds.
vote, and then we'll kind
10,
of go through
9,
there.
8, 7, 6, 5, 4.
Okay. All right. So Susie, you tell me what I'm going to talk about next.
All right, they're coming. So here's what happens. You know how this, constructive interaction, optimism. Oh, wow. Okay. Oh, LinkedIn user says value and respect. This is going to be complicated for you, Andy. So far, constructive interaction is winning. So, but it's a close race. Let's count down. 3, 2, 1. All right. Okay, we're doing it. Constructive interaction by communication. Andy, all I know is everybody likes your list.
Okay.
So yes, I say we're going with constructive interaction,
All right.
sort of tied with communication right now.
All right. So we'll do constructive interaction, and I'm like I'll be candid. Like I'm super accessible online. I'm sure we can post more comments on the LinkedIn Live afterwards, or we can come back and do more of these. But all right, cool. Let's talk about constructive interactions. So that's where the team members are solution oriented towards each other. Everyone's kind of contributing to the overall success of the work. So here's something that comes up. I mean, I've worked in a lot of big enterprises. I also, in my private practice of coaching, I work with a lot of leaders, and the constructive interaction actually comes up quite a bit, where people talk about their difficult colleagues or challenges to work with. So here's how I'm going to open this conversation. Nobody gets up in the morning and they look in the mirror and they say, you know what? I'm going to make Susie's life difficult. Like
Yeah,
people don't do that. They don't.
I don't know. My children might be doing that.
No.
Other than
Yeah,
that, okay.
I have three, so jump into my hell of the waters. But like, just it's always something just to check yourself when you're having challenges with constructive interaction, or you kind of feel that going on. Just be like, all right, this person is not intentionally making my life difficult, though that does happen. Most cases, let's say, 9 out of 10, it's not. But what I will say though is that it's common for people to act in their own self-interest. And the second point is people make the best decisions with the information that they have. So, for those of you taking notes, those are just really good, we'll call them cognitive behavioral framings. Just things to think about when you're trying to figure out constructive interactions. That people act in their
Okay.
self-interest, which is common, and they make the best information they make best decisions with the information they have. So, some things to consider with constructive interactions. Um, Questions are disarming. So, in order to sidestep challenging communications and have positive aspects of this, always lead with questions. This is like, well, help me understand this, or what do you give me more? Can you give me more information about this? Like when you lead things with like, well, why did you do that? Why is super super judgy. So try to avoid that. But when you start with questions, it's very disarming. One of the things I learned with my work with Google is they ask a ton of clarifying questions. Just before we even get into the meat of what we're talking about, there's usually 5 to 7 clarifying questions, which is great because it helps with constructive interactions. People get more context and they understand things better.
Yeah.
Before we're going to go into more about this too, but like one of the things I do want to talk about is that this comes up in the research a lot, is that it's common for this to get weaponized, especially against women and people of color. So
Yeah.
when you try to have constructive interactions, it's something that happens a lot. It's really crappy, but it's something to be aware of. Um, So if you find yourself in that situation, there's three questions that it's always helpful to ask yourself. Is the person that I'm having this interaction with, do they have my best interest? Do
Mm,
they have the life I want? And are they emotionally healthy? If you can't answer yes to any of those questions, you just take it with a grain of
move
salt
on.
and just kind of move on with your day.
Yeah, love
And the
it.
last thing, I'm sure I'm going to
Good.
get this question in the comments or afterwards. I usually do. So, what do you do when you have like two individuals on your team and the interactions are just problematic? Here's a sneaky thing to do, but it has a high success rate. Is you take those two individuals and you give them a problem to solve. Don't
Mm,
help them. Just be like, here, you two need to work this out and solve the problems. Because the more time that you spend with an individual, um, where you are working towards a common goal, the better the interactions will be.
I
All right,
love
so I want to
that.
pause for a second. I know I've been talking
Yes.
for a little bit, but Susie, I'm
Well,
going
we
to
have
let
a
you.
question.
Let's
Bobby
shoot.
Hughes posted constructive interaction. Does that equal collaboration?
They are byproducts.
Hmm.
No, so
So,
so when you talk about them diagnostically, the constructive interactions are the guardrails or the engagement of how you do that, and the collaboration is
ah,
the actual working together for an output. So if you want
okay,
like definitions on
helpful.
that, that's where it goes. But really
Yeah,
good question, Bobby. Thank you very
yeah.
much.
Well, there's another question in here from Bruno Silva. Thank you, Bruno, which is this. It's intriguing there's no value directly correlated with deliverables and pace. Any comment on that? So I know we're talking about behaviors.
Yes.
So
Yeah,
what do
we're
you
going
got?
to talk about that probably in 7 minutes. So here's the thing about high performing teams, which I'm going to reiterate before we close too, is that a lot of times when I'm working with teams or I get called in to help an executive organization, they always focus on the output, like the alignments, the goals, the
Hmm.
strategies, what are the engagement models, things like that.
Right.
And let's just call that executional stuff, like how you execute to the deliverables. The other side of that coin is the positivity stuff. It's the behaviors. It's how you do that. If you're going to have a high performing or high functioning team, you need to do both things. You need to have the executional stuff, but you also need to have the psychological safety and the trust and the camaraderie and all those things do there. Because even if you are just doing the executional stuff and you're delivering and you're doing all of that at full percent, you're only 50% there. And when you look at the research and when even with, the Apples, the Amazons, and the Googles, that behavioral stuff is always there. It's always half
Okay.
of the job. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. I thought that was very interesting though, because I really do think that is the natural inclination is to talk about what needs to get done,
Yep.
not necessarily the how you go about doing it, which is the magic of behaviors. Ta-da!
There
So,
you go.
hey, Diego, thank you for sharing your takeaways. Thank you for being here today. That is awesome. Maggie, great point. Psychological safety, so crucial.
Mhm,
Behaviors, like we could talk about behaviors all day, all day.
mhm.
So, Andy, when we were preparing for this, one of the things that
Yes.
you talked about was how leaders can create rituals that foster these behaviors on
Mhm,
their teams.
mhm.
So, could you give us an example of something that a ritual that one might try to create to foster an environment that has constructive interaction as at its core?
Oh, sure. So a couple easy ones, a couple norms that you can institute or rituals that you can work with your team. Feedback. Feedback comes up all the time. How you're doing positive feedback, there's tons of information out there on do this. There's a couple that I go to often. So at GE, we had this thing called continue consider, which is, continue doing X or consider doing
Mm,
X differently. And it just happens so regularly. We actually built an app for it. And it was just something that regularly happened. So if you're having these constant flows of dialogue, it makes the interactions a lot better. Something that is used in a lot of the big tech companies is I like, I wish, what if. Hey, I liked that this happened. I wish X would do better. Or what if this would happen next time? Um, the use of yes and, like when someone's talking, be like, okay, instead of saying no, which is always something that's a stopper for constructive interactions, be like, okay, yes, and how about this? Something else super common in product orgs is retrospectives after something
ah,
where it's just like, hey, let's have a quick talk about things, see how it goes. Um, Classes or engagement models on conflict resolution. Really smart companies actually have a model of how conflict gets resolved in the organization.
wow.
I'm a big fan of collaborative documentation, like a shared Google Doc, where just everybody has access to. So it adds for
Okay.
transparency. So those are a lot of things which are like you could institute today.
Yeah.
Was there something specific that you wanted to, like a challenge that you could think of that we could create a norm for real quick,
Well, no,
or
I
we can
really
move on
do.
to?
I love, yeah. So I'm watching the time, as you know, but yeah, I love the continue consider because I do. I mean, just simple things. And yes, and hello, that's improv. So I'm a huge fan of improv. Can you just put your class, no, you put your whole team through an improv class and solve
Mhm.
everything?
Yeah,
Yeah, that's it.
yeah.
Yeah,
There you
all
go.
it is just one little class. I'm kidding. I will not
Cool.
attribute that comment to you. But that's a fascinating way to do it. So, in interest of time, I do think I'd love for us to move on to talk about. We've talked about behaviors.
Yes.
Now we're going to talk about another component of high performing teams and dig into that a little bit. So, if we can load the question here, our next question. Nope. Can we? Our next question in the lower third is thinking about those best teams. What were the actions that helped them achieve greatness? So this is where we're going to get to what do you do? How do you do it? What do you do? So if you can throw those into the chat here,
Mhm.
please, that would be great. So what were the actions that helped them achieve greatness? And Andy, I like it when you take this next little part and go, for example, because last time you said it could be school or work. So
Yeah,
any
yeah, sure.
additional guidance?
For example, school or work or university or sports team. That's all good.
That is true.
Um,
That is true.
that's cool. Now, they could be loading those in.
Yep.
So if you want to, I can kind of just jump to a couple of these things, if that's all right.
Yeah, that would be great. Let's do
Okay,
it.
awesome. So we talked about the 7 things that were behavioral. Now it's nice that there's another 7 like technical skills or executional skills of high performing teams. Um, so the big one is alignment, where everyone on the team is working towards a common outcome or shared purpose. Alignment documentation is really good for this, and just even all hands where people are talking about how we're all going in the same direction together. The second thing is goals and strategies. Um, Everyone has the same goal and understands how they are achieving it together. Decision making, strategic clarity on what you decide to do, and also specifically what you're going to say no to.
Mhm.
Resources, the people, time, and the capital are allocated strategically to support key initiatives, and team leadership. So where we talk about the psychological safety and sustained excellence of what you are doing as a team. Proactive, which is getting ahead of problems, and this is something that is a noticeable gap with middle managers. So it's something to be aware of. And the last one is accountability, where people take ownership for the good and for the bad. And fun fact, whenever I talk about accountability, most people picture a boss, a leader, a colleague who didn't take accountability for action. So that if you're going through that in the audience, that's totally normal. But these 7 things are the other markers for the executional stuff of a high performing team. All right, Susie, how are we doing on time?
Yeah, we're right on time, actually.
Okay.
So yeah, we have a couple of extra minutes. So before we dig in to these, we do have a couple of questions here in the comments. I do want to make sure we jump into those. I'm not sure exactly how to tie this in, but you know what? I know you can do it. So Marty loaded had a question. Here we go. What's the best way to address difficult feedback when you're a leader and someone on your team has a strong ego but is not performing as strongly as they think they are? I think this might go back to our constructive interaction. Maybe.
Sure. A little bit. Can you repeat the question to me just to make sure that I
Yep.
understand it?
What's the best way to address difficult feedback when you're
Mhm.
a leader and someone on your team has a strong ego but is not performing as strongly as they think they are?
Okay. The ego is a really interesting thing to deliver. The first thing I try to understand is the person change ready, which means are they coachable? Like,
Mm,
are they able to take feedback? Because if they're not, it's not a good use of time, and that's when you need to have stronger conversations with the individual. 360s are really good for a dose of reality to be like,
mm,
okay, look, I understand that you think you're God's gift to product, but here's what your team says about you, your feedback, and stuff like that. 360s are really effective coaching and developmental techniques. And other aspects is this actually comes with feedback. It's SSOI is the framework. So the first S stands for self-evaluation. Be like, hey, so and
mm,
so, like, how do you think you're doing? The second S is the situation. So it's like, okay, here is what's going on. The O is observed. I observed that you are not delivering your expectations as well as you think you are.
Mm,
And the I is the impact. And impact, it's always business related. Like I said, the impact of you not being able to deliver what you think you're delivering is that the business suffered, or there's more people that are spending time on this thing, or you're not delivering to the expectations of what your role
yeah.
entails. That's super high level because I'm trying to be very
Yeah.
aware of time. I fully understand that the person who asked that question, I'm sure there's nuances to that, as there always is. Feel free to DM me, and I'm more than happy to
Yeah.
chat about
Thank
that.
you.
Yeah.
And hopefully that ties as well into another question that we have on effectively dealing with egos at work, especially as a woman. So,
Mm.
does this framework also work?
Ye- It's different. There
Mhm.
is I would like to say that there is very specific research out there about women executive leadership, but unfortunately, I've read all the books. Like 72% of my client base in my private practice are women and people of color, and there's not a lot of really great stuff out there. There are some reference materials I will post in the chat, which I think everybody should read. Egos are different
Mm,
because women and people of color tend to be judged more harshly, which is unfortunate, where
mm,
their expertise is viewed a lot of times by white male counterparts as ego.
mhm,
Or, and that duality is always really frustrating and challenging to navigate. The important thing to acknowledge is that the problem is rarely the woman or person of color. It's how they navigate the culture codes. Culture codes is a diagnostic term for the unwritten rules of how
mhm,
things work in an organization. Um, this is a topic I would love to talk more about.
mm.
I've given a couple lectures specifically on this,
Yeah.
and I'm more than happy to continue this conversation offline.
Thank you
Okay.
so much. That's great. I
Really.
know we could go in lots of different directions, but without going too far into those. So let's look those seven back up again at the bottom there, please.
Mhm.
So we're focusing on the skills of high performing teams, and likely what some of what you just described about feedback and how to navigate that, whether you're the
Yeah.
leader or you're not the leader, fall into some of these. But let's tackle some of these. I know we want to dig specifically into decision making here today. That is one of the things that we talked about. But
Sure.
let's. Do you have more commentary on any of these, or any parts of these that might also address that question?
Okay. I, I we can go a lot of different places into this too.
Yeah.
I fully acknowledge that these topics are really important for leaders all around the world to be aware of. And I'm also aware of the fact that we have 40 minutes to talk.
Correct. Yes.
So
Mhm.
if you want to do a part two of this, I'm all for it.
Yeah.
Or if there's something that the audience really would like more information on, for me, I want more people to have more knowledge. And it just makes us effective leaders. So if
Yep.
there's anything I could do to help us support, I will gladly do that.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Yes, and we are getting a lot of questions that are very people oriented, like just like you said to begin with. How do I navigate this? Whether I'm a leader or I'm on a team or have
Yeah.
someone on my team or whatever. That is whole people interactions, which ties directly into these skills. A common challenge, though, is decision making, which is
Yeah.
seems like an important way to keep people moving forward, keeping them moving in the right direction. There's a lot of ego, obviously, in who gets to make decisions, how they are made, all that fun stuff. I'd love to dig
Oh,
into
sure.
decision making here today. Through the lens of a high performing team, how does that happen? Decision
Okay.
making.
No, it's a really good question. I was giving a talk in London like 2 weeks ago, just specifically on this. Um, so decision making, it boils down to how you're prioritizing stuff. This is actually the most effective tool. And again, it was just for those of you taking notes, we're going to throw up some slides in a second to talk about this. But prioritization frameworks are great for decision making because they're both a compass and a shield. The compass is really good. Actually, if you want to take that slide down for a second, we're going to get into some other stuff. Thank you. So the prioritization frameworks are really good because they're the compass and the shield. The compass is they're gonna help you guide through complex landscape of like feature choices or resource allocations, anything like that. It's a good shield because it protects against the nonsense that we have to deal with as leaders. Like it protects you against the politics, the stakeholder misalignment, and the scope creep. Now, A lot of organizations struggle with this. They do. But here's the thing: leaders who can effectively do this, you're actually empowering your team to be more high performing, and it also showcases to leadership a strategic mindset and executive capabilities. So when I'm doing promotion cycles, like that's something that I look for. All right. So the first thing I want to talk about is what to prioritize. So we're gonna put up a slide real quick about the things about prioritization. Also, equally important, what to deprioritize, which we're going to talk to about this. Now, we're not going to talk about all of these, but if those of you are doing like screen shares, this is something really good for you to like. Not screen shares, like you take a picture of this so you have it for later. Something good to have. But I'm just going to talk about a few of these really quickly for the sake of time. The two that come up a lot are features that accelerate, advance, and support the overall business goals. Like when you're talking about what to prioritize, what decisions to make, whether it's a marketing campaign, product launch, design, creative, whatever it is, it always goes back to this. You know, and it's surprising that a lot of companies don't do this. The second thing is something that gives the company a strategic advantage. You know, anything that gives the company or operations a leg up against the competition. Those are really great. And the last two I want to talk about. So sustainability, which is something that comes up a lot in my conversations with Google. It's like as you're prioritizing and making decisions, like how do the products, campaigns, whatever it is you're working on, how is it sustainable, not just for now, but for years? You know, I was working in a financial services organization, and we talked about like the generational quality of a product. Like how is that going to last your life and also your kid's life? On the last one, this idea of enhancing the brand's reputation, like those things are always really good. You know, reputation is critical when it comes to purchase preference. So there's just 12 things up there that we threw up there. And now I want to very quickly jump to what to deprioritize. So if you want to throw that slide up really quick. And this is one of those really good ones to do a screen grab of, just to kind of have this. So that's cool. All right. So the first one I want to talk about, it's products or features that are politically charged. So this is really interesting because politics are something that comes up a lot, and there are many conversations I have with stakeholders where it's just like, all right, I know you want to do X, but it seems like that's conflict with, you know, what the CEO is doing or what the leadership's doing or what there's other things like that. So it's, you know, I want to work on this, but why don't you two go figure that out? And then when all the politics are aligned, I will gladly prioritize this or put teamwork on. So that's good. And then the last thing I want to talk about are these two things. One is like the Black Mirror component of this. You know, usually at the beginning of any meeting, we have like, how could this go horribly wrong? Whether it's a marketing campaign, a product launch, or whatever, like just have that conversation about like, how could this go butt over tea kettle? That's a States term. So it's just like, how can this go wrong? And just having this conversation, just be aware of, and then plan against it. And the last one, which I think is very important too, this idea of ethical or security concerns. That's the things you definitely deprioritize. If things are ethically questionable, if there are security problems, like then you pause work. Anyone who's followed Apple's business strategy for the last 2 years or so, and it's even shown up in their commercials, there's a lot of emphasis put on trust and safety and making sure people are secure with their information. So it's definitely good. So I want to be really clear though. I just gave you like 24 things. Now I am aware that every company is different. Every company looks at prioritization, different decision making. So, but these are the things that actually come up a lot. So, you know, season to taste. Think of it like a recipe. You know, what are the things that will work? What are the things that won't work within your organization? But I do want to leave you with something that's been very helpful for me. Like there's a group of 5 that actually I've had a pretty high success rate. And if you want to throw that slide up real quick. So the 5 that I use, it's 4 things that I prioritize and 1 things that I use to deprioritize. So anything that accelerates the overall business goals, like that's something we prioritize. Anything that gives a company a strategic advantage, we prioritize that. Something that solves a very specific pain point. You know, I have customers or stakeholders or user groups that come to me and I'm like, okay, what's the customer problem you're solving? And that's something, if they don't have an answer to that, that usually gives you an idea that it's not a priority. And probably like one of the more important ones here is anything that enhances the usability, accessibility, inclusivity, or equity. Like that will just make any work you're doing better. And the thing that I deprioritize is the politics. you know, when that comes up, we navigate around those conversations. We try to avoid it. So those are 5 things that are super helpful.
I love it.
Feel free to use that. I'm going to take a break. I'm going to have a sip of my drink. And Susie, we
No,
talked for a bit.
no,
So was this
no.
helpful?
That was not
What did I
on.
make
That
it
was
more
not on
confusing?
schedule.
Okay,
That was not on schedule. That's the sip. We got to write those down. So
fantastic.
yeah, no, I will leave that to comments to how helpful this is for folks. But for me, I have learned a lot, both practical, actionable things that you can do and broad concepts to consider. We do have a question now that you've had your sip.
Sure.
Bruno has a question for us. How do you set accountability in place in a way that still fosters risk taking and growth for individuals' career and the company itself? So you mentioned accountability being important, and of
Mhm.
course it is. So how do you set it in place so that it doesn't squash risk and growth?
Awesome. Fantastic question, Bruno. Thank you very much, sir. Okay, here are things that come up, and I'm going to do this very quickly. The first thing is psychological safety, having trust in place, um, making sure that people feel safe to take experiments. Now, the challenge is usually the bigger the company, or the higher cost factor of the company, the more they mitigate risk.
Mm,
So when you have risk mitigation in place, it makes it hard for people to take risk. So you need to foster a culture where it's okay to fail. Some norms and rituals that I've seen companies do with great success is talking about failures,
mm.
talking about them. The more failures you have on a regular basis, the more okay it is to get through this and make really good work. Something really interesting that Apple does. Apple runs their creative review process pretty much like Saturday Night Live, which is a show that's popular here in the States. So they start their Monday meetings where everyone's talking about what they're doing, and then everybody goes to work. Tuesday they have a review of the work. Wednesday they fix the work and they do more stuff. Thursday they review the work again with everybody, and Fridays towards the end of the day they have the meeting of possibility where all the executives, the VPs, they all look at the work, and you know what? They start the whole thing over again on Monday, and they just keep on
Wow.
doing that. And it's super safe. Everybody's okay to take some risks, some calculated risks, not blind risks, but just to experiment and try different things. So, Bruno, I'm sure this is a more nuanced question, and I'm more than happy to have this conversation with you offline. But those are a couple things that anyone can start doing to make it okay to take risks. Cool. All right, Susie.
Yes, I did enjoy that. I did. And I do think this is a very complex question, just as you said. I want to acknowledge also we are not avoiding the question about neurodifferences that came up earlier. And yes,
Oh,
this is very, very important. I think we have an entire talk, Andy, on the values diversity piece of what you were
mhm,
talking about before, and also prioritizing the inclusivity and so you brought up some great points
sure.
that address
No
this a
worries.
little bit today. So I just want to acknowledge that. Thank you so much for putting that in the chat.
I
So
can, in 10
go
seconds,
ahead.
address the neurodiversity thing.
Let's do it.
Okay,
Yes, do it.
because that is coming up so much, and there's actually really good thought leadership in the space on how to do it. I can tell you anecdotally, neurodiverse individuals index really high in product, marketing, engineering, and legal. Because in order to do, like, I'm ADHD, so in order to be able to like be high functioning as we are, we usually thrive in environments like that. So the real quick way to deal with that too is to understand the individual's communication style.
Mm,
Some people are good with emails. Some people are good one-on-ones. Some people are good at Slack. Some people are good at text messaging. Whatever the communication style is, identify that first. There's usually 3 channels that are helpful with neurodiverse individuals. It's auditory, like verbal stuff; visual, showing them pictures on how to do things; or kinesthetic, like we're helping them work through this, like with their hands, being like, "Here's how we're going to do this," or side by side. So high level, understand the communication style, and deliver in one of those 3 channels. If you find out the right one for that particular individual, because neurodiversity is a complex thing, super helpful. I will also state too, because I have to, I am not a therapist. I don't play one on the internet. This, you know, it's just this. There is cognitive behavioral approaches to this, which are really good. So, end of thought. Susie, all yours.
wonderful. You really did it. I don't know if that was 10 seconds or not because I was taking notes. I'm learning
Okay.
lots from you today, so that was really good. But I love it. I feel like there should be a mic drop for that. Like, hey, question, answer, boom, did
Done.
it. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Right on. Yay. So we covered a lot of things here today. So we talked about the behaviors of high performing teams. We talked about the skills of a high performing team? And I'm curious, Andy, how might one put all this together? What would that look like?
So
A
we
lot.
talked about 7 behaviors and we talked about 7 technical aspects of this. To do all of them is hard. Like to have a fully like high functioning, high performing team takes a lot of work and a lot of dedication. How you're going to put this together is you got to work on all of them. Don't work on all of them at once. Maybe a good
Mm,
next step, if you're a leader on this call, is to talk to your team about it. Be like, here's the research. Is there one here that has a lot of energy behind it? There's one that resonates with us, like constructive interactions resonated with everybody in this audience right now. So talk to your team about it.
yeah.
And then figure out the ones you want to work on. It's really easy to create norms and rituals on how to do this when it's co-created, working with your team. Or talk to your manager about it, talk to your leadership about it. Like, here are some things that will make us more effective as a user. Actually, don't use effective. We will have more impact as a team
Right.
when we start addressing these things. And there's tons of research out there that proves this to be fact. So I would start there. But you got to do both of them. You got to do the behavior stuff and you have to do the executional stuff.
I love it.
So
Seems like this
is
would be a great assessment too. Take a look at where your team is
yeah.
within those 7 behaviors and how their actions might mirror those skills. So,
I was just brought in by a lifestyle footwear brand to do this exact thing. And usually within that session, they targeted the thing that they want to work on. And we spent 2 hours trying to develop norms and rituals for it. And they co-created it. It's all like, this is what works in your organization.
yes.
And it works. So I do want to pause real quick with everybody. Like, is this helpful? Like, throw like yes or no into the comments. Like, is this information valuable? Is this supportive? Because it's important to me to like deliver stuff for Susie and for you all that's resonating and provides value. So just let us know. While they're doing that, Susie, what's next?
Yeah. So, well, we're at 45 minutes. I don't even believe it. It's
Okay,
just like tomorrow is the middle of December, and I don't believe that either.
cool.
So we're at wrap up here. We would love to hear from you in the chat as what you found helpful today, or whether or not you found this helpful. And of course, we put Andy's LinkedIn into the comments here as well. We'll
Oh,
include those in the comments for the recording later. So that I encourage you to reach out to Andy. And I know, Andy, I feel like I know you well, and yet
okay.
I learned a lot today. So I think there's so many things to explore, and I definitely feels like we need to do this again. So
More than happy
based on
to.
everyone's, yeah, right. Based on everyone's feedback, we'd love to find that direction and do that again. Also, obviously, if you have not yet downloaded Aquent's insights reports, please, I encourage you to do that. I think Andy will agree with me on this. More information is better. Educating yourself
Yeah.
is a great way to improve the performance of your team. Period. End of story. And so this has been fascinating for me here today. That's
Mhm.
what it was all about. Remember, we're like, hey, Susie wants to have fun. There it is.
It's
That's
good. This
it.
is a great way to go into the holiday, so it's awesome.
It is.
I will acknowledge too, before we wrap up, that
Mhm.
none of this is easy. It's
No,
hard. This is a lot of
right.
work. So, I mean, and especially as you're doing the deep work with the behavioral stuff, it's just really important, like, just to be kind. Be kind to yourself. Be kind to that person you see in the mirror every day. Like, this stuff is hard. Leadership in general
Yeah,
is a challenge. So just do your best, keep at it, and you got a support system here. So
I
thank
love
you all
it.
very much.
What a way to end on kindness. I also have a postcard on my desk that someone sent me a while ago that I love, and it says,
Oh,
"Growth and comfort never coexist."
that
And
is
I
true.
do. It's sitting on my desk to remind me when we're trying to achieve new things and make change, it's going to be uncomfortable. So that. But anyway, so approaching that with kindness. What a great way to end us here, Andy. Thank you so much for being here with us today. Really appreciate that. Thank you, everyone, for joining. This was great conversation. Hopefully, you got a lot out of it, and definitely, please reach out and keep the conversation going. So, right on.
Thank you
I
very
think we
much.
did it.
Everybody take care. Have a great holiday and New
Right
Year.
on. Thank you.